Hey team, Richard Tubb here with another episode of Tubb Talk, the podcast for managed service providers. Now, today's guest is known as the man behind the best event in the managed services industry, and somebody who has decades of experience in the channel, vendor, and managed services space. I'm talking, of course, about Rob Ray. Now, Rob is the corporate vice president of community and ecosystems for Pax8. And I don't say this, don't underplay this. He is a legendary figure in our space. I know it's going to make him blush, but Rob, welcome to Tub Talk.
Thanks, Richard. I always appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the intro.
Yeah, well, I say welcome back because a few weeks ago, you and I sat down to record a short 15-20 minute bonus episode live from the big PAX8 Beyond EMEA event in Berlin. That
Mhm.
was PAX8's first Beyond event in Europe. Now that you've had a few weeks to recover and reflect, what's your thoughts on the event?
Oh, it was absolutely phenomenal. So I have very, very high expectations for these because, myself, I've done a number of these. I've owned a number of these. We have a very, very good team here at PAX 8 that kind of, there's about 30 people that work on this thing, especially leading up to it, pretty much full time, in the month coming up to it. And we all have really, really high expectations. And I think it's safe to say that all of us had our own expectations blown away, which for me is kind of a first. I always walk out of these things, and because you're the one that's hosting the party, you always know what the problems are. You always know where the weaknesses are. You always know, what you want to improve on the next time. So you always tend to focus on the things that are kind of bringing you down.
Sure.
But when I take a step back and I'm even looking at the surveys, like I wish I could figure out. I have suspicions as to what happened, but I wish I could figure out how we got the energy so high so quick. And I hope that we can bottle that up and do it at future events.
Yeah, it was mind-blowingly good. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been to a lot of good events in my time as have yourself, but I was said to you at the time, this is knocking it out of the park. And the FOMO that we got, the fear of missing out from people who weren't at the event, followed the videos, saw the blog, saw the podcast, and everything else, mind-blowing. So kudos to you, my friend. That was,
Thank you.
almost the perfect event. What was the highlight for you?
Oh man, there were so many things. I think just being in Europe and then seeing the energy level there in Europe, the excitement around everything. Because again, being an American company, having an executive team that is predominantly Americans, you get a view outside of the United States, but basically from the locals, like from your executive leaders. And of course, they're going to tell you that everything is amazing in Europe, everything is amazing in Asia, everything's amazing in Australia. And then you actually get there and you kind of start uncovering things or seeing what it's actually like. I think just the energy level, the excitement, the willingness, the need almost for something along these lines was pretty incredible. That was for me, that was probably one of the most pleasant parts. We haven't the pandemic, we all come out of the pandemic, and my primary focus has been North America. At least, I have a global role, but it's been predominantly North America. I've been out to the Europe, like it's the Facebook. I've been out to the Europe a few times, but not nearly as much as I was pre-pandemic. So, to come out there and be able to do something less and like this, engage with old friends, see people like you again, like it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So.
It was. And here in the Europe, we say to you, thank you for that. So appreciate it. Well, I'm intrigued, Rob. What was your initial vision for the PAX 8 Beyond conferences? And we're 2 years in now. So you've had a couple of events in Denver. We've had PAX 8 Beyond EMEA in Berlin. How do you see their impact on the wider MSP community?
So it's very similar to like I ran my first user conference back at Level Platforms in 2012.
Wow.
And from that, it was only 500 MSPs. It was in Las Vegas. Really, I don't even remember why it ended up as my project, but it was. And Dan Wensley, myself, like we all pulled that together for our first and by the way, the last user conference for because we got acquired literally a week before. And that's a long story, but one of the things that happened was Austin McCord was in that audience and he saw that user conference and he said, I want Dado to have one. Because so then I joined Dado not that long after, and he said, by the way, you are going to own our user conference. And I said the same thing that most of the community said, which is why would anybody go to a backup conference, right? So, and in all honesty, I don't know why anybody would want to go to a backup conference, at least in 2013. But that gave me the opportunity to kind of like, what is this? And kind of define what it is. And whether it was Datto or ConnectWise or Kaseya or Pax8, we do these things for the community. We do these things to bring people together. Obviously, we want to showcase what it is that we're working on and everything that we're doing. And that's a great opportunity to do that. But I think there's a few side effects. I mean, as a vendor, it forces us to think about innovation because we need to be on stage now. Before we were on stage just once a year in Denver. Now we're on stage twice a year between Europe and North America. We're going to make this a thing,
We are.
between North America and now the Europe. And then, we're potentially going to be adding a third very soon in APAC. That's going to force us to kind of get on stage and talk about something new. So it kind of forces not just us, but every vendor, that innovation part, so that when we are standing on stage, because there is nothing more anticlimactic than going to a user conference, waiting for your big vendor to get on stage, and then they talk about nothing but maybe a brand change or something like that. There's like, we're in the innovation space. Let's talk about where everything's going. Let's talk about where we're investing, that kind of stuff. So I think there's that part of it. But I think that just the bringing everybody together, like, part of my title is ecosystem, and the ecosystem is all of us. And, the old expression that high tides float all boats, right? It's important that we all kind of get together, vendors, distributors, MSPs, that we all get together and kind of work towards this common target, which is, let's make our industry better. Let's make our industry more appealing. Let's make our industry more lucrative. And I think these are the perfect places to collaborate and do that. So when I bring everybody together, I want I want to be able to deliver that innovation piece. B, I want to be able to deliver enough value that you're walking out of there with a checklist of things that you learned or that you want to do. And C, and I'm putting it third, but it's probably the most important part, is the networking piece, getting everybody together in the same room to have these conversations. Because we can do Zoom calls all day long. That I don't think it's nearly as effective as you and I sitting in the bar having a beer. We're going to accomplish more in that 30 minutes than we will in an hour talking over Zoom remotely.
Agreed. And we spoke at the bonus episode when you and I sat down in Berlin, and I said actually that I felt as though the managed service events industry was becoming maybe a little bit stale in parts.
Hmm.
There was too
Hmm.
many average events,
Hmm.
and Pax8 have set a new bar for that. You've set a new
Good.
bar for yourself and your whole
Good.
team there,
Yeah.
because people are going to expect that quality going forward, which is no bad thing. Pax8, I was having the conversation with an industry veteran earlier today, and I was saying Pax8, I think, are uniquely positioned for that community piece that you talked of, where they can bring
Hmm.
everybody together, because we're
Hmm.
getting too many events, which are, and they've got a place, of course they have,
Yep.
but they're
Yep.
all around a vendor,
Yep.
rather than an ecosystem. And this
Yep.
this industry is not going to grow. It's not going to innovate. It's not going to get better unless we all come together. And I think Pax8 are uniquely positioned to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Back in the day, when I was at Level Platforms, we used to distribute only through Ingram Micro, and I can talk all day about that relationship, good and bad, but their events were always my favorite because it was an opportunity where like all the MSPs would kind of come to their disty show because it is that kind of neutral place where I'm not standing on stage pushing my newest SaaS protection product. Instead, it's like, hey, I've got 10 of these things on my marketplace. So I do agree with you. And I think, I want to lean into that a little bit where we can kind of leverage the fact that we are kind of the marketplace for MSPs. And I'm not pushing one particular product or one particular vendor. It's a place where you can come and shop around for many different vendors that sell the same tech. For me, then, that takes me back to like a less selfish place where I'm just trying to help you grow.
Yeah.
Whatever flavor of ketchup you pick, that's on you. But I just want you to grow and like ketchup. So, that's kind of, where I am as far as, in thinking about this show and where it goes. Because I do think we have that neutrality almost attached to it, which again allows us to have that open ecosystem more so than anyone else.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I was saying to you just before we came on air, my team who were at Pax8 Beyond EMEA in Berlin with me as well, at the end of the event, they turned around and said to me, so we're going to Amsterdam next year for this. Like they were telling me, which is the mark of
Wasn't
a
a
good
question.
event.
It
So
was a
so
statement.
give us the date for next year. I'll ask you later in the show, but for the benefit of anybody listening who's already getting FOMO, when's Pax8 Beyond EMEA 2025?
I'm quickly Googling it. It is in
This is how you
October.
put your friend on the spot on a podcast.
Amsterdam. It is in October, October 13th,
October 13th.
2025. So it's going to be, it's a 2.5 day event in Amsterdam there's a conference center. There's a hotel right next to the conference center. I've already been there a couple of times and scouted it out. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
It's only about 10 minutes away from like downtown Amsterdam, 20 minutes away from anything that you would want to really do. So it's a great spot. I believe the train is right there as well, so pretty easy to get around. Yeah, I'm really excited about the Amsterdam event. I think we're going to take it to a whole new level there. Plus the Dutch, they're always super hospitable, and it's always nice to be there.
You
Um,
nailed it. The Dutch MSP community, my goodness,
yeah,
we could do a whole podcast about some of the stories there, but
yeah,
we're going to have a lot of fun there next year. So I'm
yeah.
looking
I
forward to
agree.
that. So,
I agree.
so
Yeah, so that's in October.
October. So we'll touch upon that before the end of our conversation today. But I want to shine a light a little bit on your journey, Rob. So you've already alluded to it. Prior to Pax8, you had senior roles at Datto, who were acquired by Kaseya. You were at Level Platforms, who were acquired by AVG.
Yep.
Even going back, you were at Compact Computers, weren't you? Who were
Yep.
acquired by HP. So
Yep.
reading between the lines here, Rob Ray is undoubtedly someone who plays a significant role in business development. Give us some
Fair.
insights into this story of your journey in the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to say that I had influence over the acquisitions, but most of the time I was just a cog in the wheel. So it did start actually. I was actually in finance. I was in banking for about 12 years of my career. Started there really, really early because that's where my family was from. And in all honesty, my family's British. And for some reason, in Britain, to work for a bank is a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
In
historically it is.
Canada, not so much, but my British family thought it was fabulous that I worked for a bank. True story. My grandfather, God rest his soul, immigrated from the UK to Canada, and when I got a job at a bank, he was so proud. And I moved over to IT purely by mistake. Obviously now, it was the best move I could have ever made. But even on his deathbed, he still kept asking me how the bank was, and I'm like,
No.
Grandpa, and I'm in IT, and he goes, you stick with that bank, right? So that was always about the banking. But got into IT mostly because there was more money to be had. Ended up at Compaq Computers, which was a phenomenal company. What a great company! And that's when I learned, because Compaq back then was channel only and wouldn't sell direct to end users. You had to go through, back then we were called resellers. And that's when I learned about this kind of loyalty to the channel and kind of working with solution providers. Even though there wasn't a lot of trust back then, there's still, you still run into trust issues here and there, but back then it was pretty dog eat dog. Like resellers would sell any hardware vendor that was giving them the best deal. Hardware vendors would give the best, to their best resellers. That kind of stuff was going on. But we saw this transformation with some other vendors coming into the market and starting to sell direct. We saw hardware margins disappear. That's when I kind of saw the movement towards managed services and towards the services piece of everything. And I thought, you know what? I can continue to be a small guy in a big company, but let's try to get to something, because this is IT, right? It's innovative, it's growing. There's always something new. Let's get into something that's maybe more of a startup. I'd always worked for enterprise companies. And that's when I found Level Platforms. I found Dan Wensley and Level. I can't even remember how I found them, but that's how I found them. I found them, a small little RMM company in Canada. There they were obviously channel only. That was our beginning of transitioning from reseller to MSP. So I was involved in a lot of those early conversations with Dan and Sean Sweeney and the rest of the guys at Level, where we weren't talking about RMM. We were talking about how to become and why to become an MSP. So just kind of like back then, we kind of creating a business model, and ConnectWise and Arnie was doing the same, and Gavin and Mark Scott over at Enable were doing the same thing, and Mike Cullen over there. We were all doing the same thing, even though we are all competing with each other, which was this: let's move from reseller to MSP, let's move from one time to recurring revenue. And then you look at where we are today, and it's just mind blowing that this, not only did we create an industry, but we created a very lucrative one, one that a lot of people are making a lot of money. And you fast forward, you talked about acquisitions, and Now there's private equity and venture capital to the tune of billions of dollars. We sold Datto for $6.2 billion dollars. This is a small Connecticut startup that was bootstrapped by Austin himself, right? It's insane to think. And that was a channel only company. That was an MSP only company. And just even to go, like, we went public before we actually sold the company, even to go IPO as a MSP only organization, it's just absolutely insane. But it was something we were so passionate about, and that's kind of been my journey. And Pax 8 for me was very similar. It's like, who cares most about the channel? That's where I want to go work. Who cares most about the MSPs? That's where I want to go work. So, that's kind of where the journey started and kind of evolved. And a lot of it was literally by mistake or by, coincidence, luck.
Yeah, synchronicity there. Yeah, I didn't realize about your British background, the family there, and everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. I knew there was a reason I liked you, Rob. Now I've got it. Yeah. You're from the Europe originally, so
From the Europe.
yeah. I bumped into Dan Wensley, who you mentioned there at in Berlin at your event. Man, that
Yeah.
guy never ages. I think he's got a portrait in a loft somewhere that's aging on his behalf. But yeah,
Well, the
he's
problem is he's looked 85 since he was in his 20s. That's the problem. He's just catching up to what he looks like. You're
you
right, he
are
doesn't
unkind.
age, but
Dude looks brilliant. And Compaq you mentioned, I remember with fond memories. I was an accredited Compaq technician. Used to love opening those machines and doing those things back in the day. So yeah, you've had a rich history in this industry already. When you've barely even started. And I'm intrigued. You were at Datto nearly a decade, wasn't it?
yep.
What
Yeah,
motivated
almost 10 years.
what motivated the move to Pax8, and how has your role evolved since you've joined Pax8?
So, it's funny, like there was lots of, good reasons to stay at Datto. And you've been there since, like, I think I was employee 50 or something like that. And watch the company evolve from a scrappy startup barely making payroll to, becoming, arguably the market leader in the MSP space for backup and disaster recovery. We saw the evolution of the story, the evolution of the market. We saw the growth of the people. I think we had 1,800 people or something along those lines when we ended up going IPO. You go through the journey of venture capital, private equity, IPO, the exit and the sale. You go through various CEOs. You go through rapid growth, internationally. It was such a phenomenal ride. And you get to this certain point where the organization's pretty set, right? It is going, the technology is there, you have your partner base there, and the impact that you're having on the organization, personally, the impact that you're having on the organization kind of starts to diminish just because, like, it's so big at that particular point. And for me, it was like I'm 52 years old. I'm thinking, maybe I got one more of these in me, another 10-year run at an organization. Do I want it to continue to be this where I'm just going to be again another cog in the wheel, or can I go and make an impact on a business, another potential unicorn that's kind of running off and trying to do things. So, I kind of started looking around the market and I found some awesome vendors that are out there that are doing some really innovative stuff. And that's the part that I loved about Datto. And that's the part I love about this whole channel was the innovation that goes on. As much as we hate change and, we just want everything to kind of stay the way it is and just, consistently grow where it is. But, when you're not innovating, not changing, not moving, it gets pretty boring. And, for me, not that my job over there was boring because there was so much diversification and there's the acquisition, there's so many new leaders, there's so many things to be excited about. But I'm thinking, you know what? It'd be nice just to put another shirt on at this particular point. Not to mention the fact that, when I talked to, and I've known the executive team at Pax8 between John Street, Nick Hetty, Ryan Walsh, I've known these guys for a number of years, almost a decade, such mad respect for what they've been able to accomplish in here. And then I met Scott Chasen, who's our CTO, now our CEO, and he showed me the vision of what they want to do. And it's another transformation of a space. It's taking Disty, which has been old and antiquated and very little innovation in this space, and creating something new, but putting the MSP in the center of it. Like, all these things are ticking boxes. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I see my doctor regularly because we travel a lot, and we don't have the healthiest of lifestyles. I don't have the healthiest of lifestyles. So, I want to make sure that as much as I can, stay for of live as long as I can. You're going to ask me where I'm going with this. They take my blood pressure every time I'm in there, and the blood pressure cuff that they put around and the
Oh
pump, and
yeah.
Like that is, and I rant to my doctor every time she does this. It's the same technology they've been using for 100 years. Like,
Yeah.
why have they not figured out a better way to take blood pressure? You would think there would be much better, innovative ways to take blood pressure. And in my mind, it's old. Yeah, fair, but
Well,
they don't
I've got
trust it. But
I've
they
got
don't
two
trust that
smartwatches on here,
technology.
and I've got an Actia, which is not available in North America. Actually, it's a European, from sorry, the European thing on the left hand side. But you're absolutely right. Sorry for forgive me for
No,
interrupting.
no,
Yeah.
no, you're absolutely right. Because doctors don't trust that technology. And so anyway, my whole point is like you get to a point where you're in an industry that's just old and boring and not innovating and not changing. I did this, I worked in the payroll industry with my finance background. I worked in payroll for about 4 years. Beyond working with people, it was boring as hell. There's no innovation, there's no creativity, there's nothing changing. It's just in essence trying to just make more money selling more crap. So, this is where, I look at the impact that we can have at Pax8 and the impact that I can potentially have on the actual channel, not to mention to work for an amazing executive team who cares very much about the MSP. It was a no-brainer for me. And this, gives me another opportunity to potentially ride another unicorn into the sunset. So we'll see.
I totally, totally get it. I get a lot of feedback from listeners to this podcast show, and they say you've had a number of Pax8 people on there, and I say, well, one of the things that I like doing at this stage of my career is shining a light on the positive disruptors, the people who are making things better, not just disrupting for the sake of it, but making
Hmm.
things better where
Hmm.
change needs to come. And man, I like Pax8, including yourself, Philip Morgan, so many other people have got these type of people in absolute spades. So you've seemingly built a culture at Pax8 that many would be incredibly envious of. So many people at Pax8 that I know who do really incredible work are just phenomenal people. How would you describe the culture at Pax8? How have you gone about attracting so many good people?
It's funny because you see this evolution, and I saw this at Datto as well. I mean, I think most organizations, if you take a look at the larger, at least vendors, even the larger MSPs now in our space, and you think about where the journey starts and where the journey is, there's a certain point where you have to sort of hit a certain level of maturity, and Pax8, very similar to Datto, it was like we're a family, we're a family, we're a family. And you get to this point where all of a sudden you can't be a family anymore because families don't lay people off. Families don't fire you for bad performance. You still get the invite to the Christmas dinner, even though you suck as a human being. So like unfortunately, this whole kind of like culture thing starts out as we're gonna work together, we're gonna be best friends, we're a family, and then ultimately it doesn't long term work out that way. And I've watched Pax8's journey, and we're going through a state of transformation right now. And it's very, very similar to what I've seen a couple of different times with larger organizations. You get to this point where it's like, you got to start taking things seriously. You got to start watching the bottom line. You got to start prepping to make sure that you're making the right investments in the future. And sometimes that comes at the sacrifice of doing something that's just not profitable, or something that just doesn't work. Um, so it's really, really hard to get, well, to start that culture. And, again, I think we had that very, very much at Data, where we just wanted to create a place where people wanted to come and work. Austin used to say it, I want you to do your best work here. Meaning I want to create an environment where you're just coming in and you're happy, you're working hard, you want to come to work every day. It's, I can't remember whose line it is. You probably know, but it's not work if you enjoy it.
Sure.
Right. So that's kind of the culture that you want to create, along with one that is, providing support, but also, and this is where the transformation kind of comes in and the maturity comes in, also one that rewards success. We all are here for a particular reason. None of us are doing this because, we really are not, we don't do this as charity, right? We all do this to try to make money, feed our families, pay our mortgages, those kinds of things. And we try to do it for as many people as we possibly can. And I think that's kind of where culturally you get this kind of clash between, reward success, but you also got to pay attention to little things. And I think that's the big difference is we pay attention to little things because we do believe that happy employees equal happy customers, or in this particular case, partners. So if the person answering the phone, your account manager, is happy with their place in life from a work perspective, you're gonna have a better experience as a partner. So, culturally, that's just kind of where it starts. But It's something that's constantly evolving, and as it grows, especially internationally, we got to keep bringing that back, and we talk about it extensively. Is we have kind of three pillars that we talk about in every single exec call: people, product, and profit. Right. So we always start and spend most of our time on people. Where are we from a people perspective? How are people feeling? Are we competitive? Are we doing the right things? Kind of keeping a pulse on that, as well as, the product and the product innovation, and then the profit, which is, in essence, how we're going to market, how we're making money. But we always start with and spend most of the time on people.
Yeah, I find it incredible. Like you, a lot of people, I know a lot of people in this industry. A lot of people know me, and I regularly get people reach out to me saying, looking for other opportunities. I'm looking around in the marketplace, and they invariably ask me, "You do advisory work with Pax8? Is there, what's going on there?" But I got to tell you, Rob, I have not yet had anybody from Pax8 reach out to me and say, "Yeah, I'm not altogether happy. I'm looking
Oh,
around for."
nice, good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good.
Not
Well,
that
let's
I would
hope that
share
that
with you
never
directly
changes.
anyway, if that happened. You know what I'm saying? But genuinely, that is the case at the moment. So yeah, you are building something incredibly strong there, and keep
Awesome.
doing it because it's a fascinating journey to watch as well.
Thank
So
you.
you're the VP, Vice President of Community and Ecosystems at Pax8. We've already talked about the incredible events that you run there, but of course you're much more than just the events guy at Pax8. So what does your role entail on it? What does Rob do on a day-to-day basis?
That's a lot. So, a lot of it is, and this is kind of the ecosystem. It's the two parts of community and ecosystem. Yeah, the events are important, but the events are nothing more than a mechanism to engage with people. We're constantly writing what content it is that we actually want to deliver to people. What's the message that we want to deliver? So on a day-to-day basis, first of all, it's anything outward, like working with you, for example. Like, this is my third podcast in the last 2 days.
Wow.
So it's a lot of that, is just trying to get that message out, trying to be a good member of the community. I also proactively watch all the forums and boards to make sure and, keep a pulse of what's going on from an MSP perspective. If there's something on fire, if there's something that people are unhappy with, making sure that all those, pieces are kind of connected within the organization. I think part of the hardest part of a lot of these vendors is that as you continue to grow, you don't want to become the nameless, faceless organization. Um, you don't want to become, I mean, as much as all of us would love to become Microsoft at one point, you don't want to become the organization where you're like super large, have, hundreds of thousands of employees, yet you can't call any of them. You can't get a hold of any of them. Like, you don't want to be that organization. Um, Potentially, so for us, it's making sure that as we continue to grow, as we continue to expand globally, that we have these connection points where you feel like you can pick up the phone and call somebody and have a conversation with a real human being at an executive level where, things can get done, things can get solved, your voice is actually heard. Those are the kinds of things that are kind of really important to me. On top of that, obviously we're doing a bunch of 2025 planning and strategy and budgeting and headcount and all those types of things right now, hiring, all that stuff. So just a lot of it is right now, it's a lot of it is just that.
Mm.
But I love my job because, for me, I've got a lot of flexibility in it because I do travel, you travel, and, you see this, like, a lot of times we work weekends, we work a lot of evenings, that kind of thing. So I've got a lot of, flexibility within my schedule where I can pretty much do a lot of what I want to do when I want to do it. But there's times where the community comes calling, and very similar, like events like this, spending time with you, and taking opportunities like this are super important. So
Yeah, well, you are a very visible figure in the community. We appreciate what you do. Appreciate you taking the time. 3 podcasts in 2 days, man alive! I don't think I've recorded that many in quite some time. So
not true. In Berlin, you were like back to back to back.
You're right. You're right. Of course. Hey,
Yeah.
to that point, your Pax8, I had to ask your PR department about this. Daniel, there, I said, how many countries are you in? Then Daniel tells me Pax8 have grown into 39 countries now.
Yeah.
How are you finding the challenges and opportunities, of course, in working with colleagues from different cultures, different time zones? You
Yeah.
talked about APAC, for instance. That's got to be a whole new set of challenges there and
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah, it does. And sometimes they feel incredibly far away, and then sometimes they feel incredibly close. So Microsoft Ignite was last week in Chicago, and there were about 10,000 attendees, all in, probably about another 15,000 if you add in staff and stuff like that. It was an opportunity for us to bring our executive team. So Harold, our leader out in the Europe, was there, and Chris Sharp, who's our leader out in APAC, was there. So it was always an opportunity for us to touch base, and we have a tendency to get together, physically get together, at least on a quarterly basis. I feel bad for them because a lot of times they need to work more in the American time zones because most of our employees and most of our executive team are in the United States. That being said, they've a lot of a lot of Europeans and Aussies and Asians are kind of used to that. When you work for an American company, you got to be ready for that. But yeah, you're right. Culturally, not much is different. I always have this argument that's like, things are different here. Sure. There's about 5% in my mind that's different between how the Brits attack their day versus how the Americans do versus how the Canadians do. It might be 10% for, the Lithuanians because they just come from a different background. But ultimately, as human beings, we're all motivated and want and desire the same things. It's just kind of rooted into our DNA. And what I have found is that as I've had an opportunity to kind of expand and travel around the world and talk to MSPs, there really isn't much different. We're all kind of working towards the same goals. How we get there might be slightly different. You do have some extreme markets, there's no doubt about that. But in essence, the way, most of, I'll say, Western culture or English speaking countries, because even Southeast Asia tends to work very similar to how the Americans work and the Brits work and the Aussies work, even though, their journey is a little bit different going from SI to MSP versus a reseller kind of traditional model. And then there's also some unique challenges and some unique geographies. But, I've never been intimidated about going into a brand new market and talking to people in there, and a lot of times it's more curiosity. What is everybody else doing? Because they're stuck in their own little world potentially. This is what again goes back to those conferences. They're stuck in their own little world. And when you can match up a Latvian with a guy from Arkansas and they can solve each other's problems because we work in the same space, we use the same tools, our go to market is very similar. That's pretty cool. That's really cool when you can kind of match those two up and work together like that. So it's fascinating, it's interesting, but this managed services thing and how SMBIT is going to be taken over by managed service providers globally, it's a real thing. It's a very real thing. And that's why you're seeing us and a lot of organizations and a lot of billions of dollars leaning heavily into what you and I do every day.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Mhm.
And thinking back to when we started out doing this, do you ever think it'd get to this stage? It was like you knew there was going to be evolution, but I don't think we could have dreamed it would be as big. And we've barely scratched the surface at this point in time, barely scratched the surface. So crazy
Agreed.
times.
Completely
Yeah, yeah,
agreed.
yeah.
Completely, especially when you start looking at economies in Asia, at like just some of those economies. I'm not talking about China per se, but when you start looking at some of the scale that's out there and where SMB lives, like it's pretty incredible. It is pretty incredible. I had an
Yeah.
opportunity to travel through South America not that long ago. And they have some unique challenges down there where the managed services market just really hasn't kind of taken off quite yet. But the unique challenges I think come through economic strains more than anything else. It's not because the business model doesn't work. It's more like a shyness from like really wanting to take that by control. But wandering around Buenos Aires or Santiago and looking at all the small businesses out there and just that economy, like there's so much opportunity and we're just scratching the surface in the markets that we all know. Benelux, UK and I, North America, like those are easy, in comparison to some of the other stuff, but there is so much more out there and it's exciting. It's a really exciting and this is I think the growth opportunities are going to continue for decades.
Yeah, I was at an Acronis conference a couple of years ago and happened to, what we do at breakfast when you go down for breakfast at the conference, you sit with people you know. And I was like, no, I'm going to go and sit with people I don't know. And I
Yep.
happened to sit with a table for South American MSPs from lots of different countries and that. Fascinating to see
Yep.
the growth that they're experiencing over there. And, not without its challenges, but that is a real growth area in the whole
Yep.
global managed services economy. Estonia. Have you, Pax8 made an acquisition in Estonia a little while ago. Have you been to Estonia yet?
I have not. I had my first opportunity to go to the Baltics to Lithuania
Yeah,
this year in 2024. It was awesome. It's always kind of been on my bucket list is
me
to go to
too.
that part of the world. And we have a phenomenal team that's out there. But again, walking into a market that I've never spent any time in, barely know a lot about. I've personally wanted to travel to that part of the world, but now I get there and we're having business conversations, and they are no different than the conversations I'm having in Sweden versus the US versus Australia. Like it's fascinating. The maturity levels, of course, are a little bit different, but just that thirst for information, knowledge, what is everybody else doing? What do we do? And I'm sure you ran into a lot of the Baltic folks, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians in Berlin, because I noticed there was a plethora of them there as well.
Yeah.
Who are all coming and learning this MSP business model. It's fascinating.
Yeah, well,
Fascinating.
Estonia is on my bucket list, similar to you. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I'm a digital resident of Estonia because
Really?
Estonia's got a massive e-residency program, the best in the world. Estonia is the most digitally advanced country in the world. Well, like they completely built from the ground up again, and focused on the electronic side of things. And yeah, I was due to visit Estonia just before the pandemic, and of course that wiped everything. And man alive, I've just not made the opportunity to go back there again. So let me know when
So
you're
so
gonna.
hold on. So
Yeah,
you are a citizen of Estonia, but have never been to the country.
correct. E resident of Estonia. I'm going to send you some links to this afterwards so you can check it out. But Estonia is a really, really popular country for if you want to set up a business. Not that I
Yeah.
have, but if you
Yeah.
want to set a business up without all of the red tape, and if you want to do things the way business should be done, all electronically, Estonia is a real hub for that. They are attracting businesses from all over the world to set up their businesses in Estonia, not for tax reasons or anything like that. And I'll share with you, so when I got wind of this, and I'm like, this sounds really interesting. What is this little country that I'd only ever heard of on the Eurovision Song Contest before? And it is the most digitally advanced country in the world. So when
Yeah.
Pax8 made that acquisition over there a couple of years ago, I'm like, wow, this is a country that's going places. So
We
we've got to
should
go and check it out.
we should do that together because I would love
Yeah.
to check out Estonia, and Lithuania was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The people, the food, everything was great. Even the weather was phenomenal. And we were there, I think it was in the spring that we were there. But such awesome history, culture, all that stuff. So yeah, if you're heading out there, I'll find an excuse. We'll get some work done. But and then being a resident, I'm sure you can show me around.
Well, there we go. I've never been there before, but I'm sure I can.
An e-resident.
I've got some weight I can throw around there. So.
We'll do virtual tours of Estonia together.
Okay, so changing tack. We've talked about Richard and Rob's travel bucket list there, which wasn't supposed to be the purpose of the show, but you mentioned community. Of course, we talked about Pax8 being, almost like the nexus, the center of this wider community. What initiatives are you currently working on at Pax8 to strengthen those community ties amongst all the different MSPs out there? And why do you think community is so important to our industry? Because I talk to people from outside our industry about the nature of our community, and it blows other
Yeah.
people's minds that
Yeah.
competitors get together for the greater good. So tell us a bit about what's going on behind the scenes at Pax8.
Yeah, the community aspect of everything that we do in the managed services space is by far unique. And I think there's a couple of different reasons as to why, because it is, and you've been at this for as long as I have, Richard. It's hard to explain to somebody not from this industry what it's like. And if you think about kind of our industry and the way it's growing, especially on the vendor side, we are bringing in people that do not have MSP experience, and they're coming, and we're attracting more and more people from the enterprise world down into this. And of course, they come in here with this notion that things work the same in enterprise as they do in the managed services space, and they do not. Like we actually work together. Competitors work together. We share information. We talk to each other, globally. Just go to Reddit. You can see how much is kind of going on. You don't find that anywhere in information like that. So, it is fascinating, and it's almost like surreal to be able to explain it to somebody and they almost don't believe you that
Yeah.
there is this community of people sharing, especially IT people, because we're considered like, I don't know, sitting in a basement in the dark somewhere, like mushrooms or something. So it's really, really cool. So from a community aspect, when I want to lean in on this, It is investing in how we can help our partners grow, right? How do we help them grow? And it's this whole idea that if the managed services space grows, if they get more SMB or SME IT into their portfolios, like this is great for everybody, including the vendors, including where we are in the ecosystem and the marketplaces. So for us, it's all about growth, and we invest significantly into our academy team. And our academy team is multifaceted. It's training, it's education. One of the benefits actually of our Beyond conferences, and if you go to any of these conferences, it's always about the content. The content needs to be good. The quality of the sessions needs to be high. I'm not going to waste my time if you're not going to be able to teach me anything. I have an entire team that does this like full time, and a lot of that content that they produce is actually for free for our partners, in an effort to help them grow. That includes, peer groups and professional services and all those types of things in order to help. And so, we're continuing to invest quite a bit into that aspect of it. My task more so is, and we're going to continue to expand that, and we're making significant investments in that to help that grow globally, because the academy team does reach into the Europe, and it also reaches into APAC, and now into the Baltics and the Nordics and all those types of things. So we're performing those services and have former MSPs working on that team doing that. So that's something that's really exciting for me, though. Um, One of the things that I like to do, and I like to kind of challenge my team with, is, because we kind of sit on the edge, we kind of sit right on the forefront, is being able to deliver to the MSPs the what's next. Is what do we all need to be thinking about? And we've seen this numerous times. If you think back to kind of when we all started here and how much we have transformed and changed from where we were, yet the one thing that's kind of been consistent in the last, let's call it 3 decades, has been that the managed service provider or reseller has always been there, right? And we're going to continue to be there. Like nothing, I don't think there's anything that could replace the MSP in the SME, SMB business model for the foreseeable future. And every time somebody has talked about or doomsdayed our industry, they've always been wrong. Cloud is going to change everything. You know what? Cloud did change everything, but guess what? The MSP is still the center of everything cloud. Back in the days, I imagine people sitting around talking about how the internet was going to change everything, and sure, it did change everything. But if anything, it created more opportunity. Cybersecurity, exactly the same thing. It's scary, it's dangerous, it's going to suck, and the MSP is not going to be able to keep up. Well, guess what? The MSP has been the center of everything. When I'm thinking about like kind of what's next, I do a little bit of a historical reminder of, guess what? We've always not only survived these changes in our spaces, but we've thrived. And if you take a look at, how cybersecurity is continuing to evolve today, compliance is becoming a bigger and bigger issue within the SME space. AI is now on the forefront of what we're going to be doing. It feels very reminiscent of 2000, what was it, 2008, 2009, where we started talking about cloud. And all of a sudden there's this big revolution that's coming called the cloud. And, the AI, we've been talking about it in the same way. It's like, I feel like kind of my job, my responsibility, this whole community aspect is, let's start thinking about what's next. Let's not panic. Let's make sure that we are and continue to be the center of everything, and all this business continues to come through us. So, that's where I kind of focus a lot of my energy and time, is looking for those trends, looking for those stories, looking for those opportunities for us to continue to push. Um, yeah, I mentioned, and we've hinted at it a couple of times. And for those that aren't familiar with Pax 8, we're on a journey to move away from distribution and more into marketplace. And that's just not an industry catch term. That is legit go to business model that leverages AI to help people make more money, make better recommendations, find better products that are more suited towards your organization, towards your clients. That's leveraging technology in a proactive way. So, if you think about the grocery store analogy, rather than you walking up and down to try to find the right brand of mustard, instead you walk in and it already knows what brand you should have based on buying experience, based on what your family enjoys, those kinds of things. So, it's more so of, and by the way, here's the mustard that you want. Don't waste your time walking up and down the aisles, kind of thing. Um, so, it's things like that, and the reasons why that's happening. We talk a lot about the buyer journey. I'm spending a lot of time talking about the buyer journey, which is, Gen Zers are coming up and they don't want to engage with salespeople. They want to make them feel like they're in control of the actual buying process and the products that they're actually buying. and us as even, Gen Xers and millennials, like we all went through this pandemic and found new ways to consume things, and we like it. We like it a lot. We're doing research on our own. I'm actually doing some plumbing right now in my kitchen, almost by accident. The wife says, "Hey, the sink is backing up." So of course I start taking it apart, at which point it starts falling apart. And now what was supposed to be a simple fix has now become a massive issue.
Of course.
And there's this unique part that is from this sink that she's got. And, normally you'd run down to the plumbing store, the hardware store, or something like that, try to find a replacement. Instead, I Google Lens it. I find it on Amazon. It's coming to my house tomorrow. For shit, for stuff and giggles. I almost cursed. For stuff and giggles, I stopped by the hardware store on my way back this morning, and lo and behold, they don't have the part. They've never seen it before. They don't know where you'd find it. So, I just wanted to test that kind of theory, but this is the kind of buying experience that we're all kind of going through these days. And it's, I can YouTube a video on how to take this sink apart and put it back together. I don't necessarily even need to call a plumber to do it, right? So this is kind of the new world, and this is the way, how do we start thinking about this, and what do we do to make sure that the MSP continues to stay relevant in all this? If we're the plumber in that situation, how do we make sure that the plumber is still adding enough value that we're still calling the plumber?
Yeah, love these conversations. Absolutely love them, and the community aspect that we talked about there. CompTIA being that almost nexus, bringing all. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Pax8, CompTIA are going to come in the conversation next, bringing together all those different communities. For instance, when we set the Tech Tribe local groups up here in the UK, so people could actually get together rather than just chat behind a keyboard. Pax8 were front and center for saying, "Yep, we'll sponsor that." What do you ask for in return? Nothing. You
Right.
give the pizzas. You just know that fermenting that community, getting that community going, is going to be good for the whole industry, including Pax8 and CompTIA, who I accidentally said earlier. You serve on a variety of industry advisory boards, including the board of directors for CompTIA, and of course, CompTIA recently announced that they've been acquired by HIG, Thoma Bravo. How do you see that move impacting our industry? And CompTIA very well thought of as a community. You're a big part of that community as well. Well, how do you
Yeah.
see that move?
Uh, yeah. So I'm actually very bullish on it, and I'll explain why. I've been a member of the communities with CompTIA since I basically started in the managed services space. Again, I'll give Dan Wensley credit for this, where when I first came in, he's like, there's this association, nonprofit association called CompTIA. It's based exclusively on us donating our time and our thoughts and our leadership, and you're going to get this and this and this out of it, which a lot of it is just more relationship building and networking and all that type of stuff. And he forced myself and a couple of key individuals to go and do that. And now fast forward 10, 12, 15 years later, I'm on the board for CompTIA. It's an exciting time because, for me, the association part of this, which is the nonprofit part of this, has always been the exciting part.
Yeah.
That is not part of the acquisition. That is something that is going to continue on its own. And it's going to get the attention and love that it deserves, more so than ever before. So it's going to survive in perpetuity based on what you've seen in the press releases. It'll continue to be a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. It'll have its own executive team. It'll have its own board, and I believe, we'll be able to do more than ever before with this association. And I'm saying that as a contributor to this community, not as a board member, but I do feel like this is an exciting time for that association where we can really start instituting change more so than ever before.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's initially when people heard the news, jumped to conclusions, perhaps some people about what it actually meant. But I do think it's going to be a good thing for CompTIA or whatever CompTIA ends up being called going forward, the
Yeah.
association and the community
Yeah.
side of things. So, but
In all fairness, a lot of our space do get a little bit jittery when they start hearing
yeah,
private equity, and it's natural. It's been going on since even before private equity was in our space. People didn't even like venture capitalists back in the day. Because these people are coming down here. I say down here, but they're coming into our space, into the MSP space, to make money. Let's be honest.
yeah.
It's not necessarily about innovation or community or better tech support or better products. It's about how do we make more money. And if you do all those things and it helps you make more money, even better. But ultimately, that's what they're here for. So I think a lot of people immediately, without understanding the nuances of the actual deal, and rightfully so, got a little bit weary about private equity being involved. But this is the association; it's a completely different side of the business, and yeah, I'm very bullish on what we're going to be able to do there.
Yeah, agreed. So I said we wanted to shine a light on Rob Ray during this podcast, and you've spoken very openly and honestly about your career. Appreciate that. So, reflecting on your time in the managed service industry, what would you say are some of the key lessons that you've learned that continue to guide your approach to leadership and community engagement within the MSP space today?
Yeah, there's so there's a couple of things, and it's funny if you talk to any of the guys that are still in the industry, that worked in the Level Platforms days, right? So
Mm.
Level Platforms was an RMM. It was sold to AVG Technologies in 2013, when I made my exit and moved over to Datto. But what we built at that level, RMM was hard, especially back then. You're talking about a new technology that needs to be everything for everyone, and it's relying upon integrations with other tools, all the other tools, in order to be able to create it. So it takes a long time to build an RMM. It was an immensely difficult technology, and again, we're still in early days, but you got to go and sell this stuff. So we used to talk about how we'd have these like 6 months on, 6 months off, where we had 6 months of, we'd come out with a release, we'd break everything, people would complain, MSPs would be upset for about 6 months while we fixed all the bugs, and then we had 6 months of great times, and then we'd come out with the new version and break everything again for 6 more months, and you just kind of go through this cycle. But one of the things that I learned, and one of the things I'm very proud of, is as much as MSPs were getting upset with us, we didn't have the best technology. We weren't even the cheapest technology. We cared, and because we cared, I found that MSPs, there's a lot of forgiveness there, more so than you would think in the technical space. That if you actually care about these people and genuinely, have honest, transparent conversations with them, what's going on, why is it happening, and by the way, the basics, just even answer your phone when somebody's upset. That's where we learned a lot of that. And if you think, and I think back to that, so that's 20 years ago. And probably 95% of that team is still in the channel, and that for me is most probably one of the more incredible parts is, it's such an awesome place to be. And, a lot of those people have very, very much thrived. Irvish Badiani, it was the first time I met him. He's now a senior vice president here at Pax 8, selling in the Americas. Ray Setawan, Mike Campion are over at ConnectWise being very successful. There are a lot of those guys, Barry Hall, Marty Lefebvre, Michael Lewis, they're all still at Datto being very successful. Like it's funny how, 20 years later, these guys are all still kind of kicking around. Nadia is over an executive over at Enable now. Like it's crazy to think, that, and, as far as lessons go, you know, as much as we were getting kicked in the teeth, as much as we are getting kicked in the teeth, it was also a great learning opportunity for us to know how to work with this channel. So, I moved over from there to Datto, and not only did I have the benefit of a great product with a great leader, but I also was able to continue with that community aspect of it, which made life even easier. And
Mm.
then, PAX 8, same situation. So, that whole community aspect of it. And it's funny, you start seeing how vendors are investing in it. I remember when I joined Datto, our mission was to create a better community than ConnectWise. That's how many years ago, how many decades ago was that? And, arguably we got close, if not, there. And then, ConnectWise still seems to be a class standard community, but we're still kind of dealing with a lot of like this nuanced community aspect of the conversation, and it comes from a lot of those lessons that we learned back in the early days. Was, we're kind of all in this boat together, and it
Mm.
can sink. We can get mad at each other, but, like, let's not let it sink. Let's all continue to work together and figure out how we get to our destination. And then once we get to our destination, then we can start looking for better boats and better captains and all those types of things. So, but in the meantime, let's not sink. So
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned some wonderful people that I've got good memories of there. Who else has inspired you or played a significant part in your journey, Rob?
Oh, wow. So, I mentioned Dan a few times during the
Mhm.
course of this call. As much as I hate to give Dan credit for anything, I mean, in essence, he's the one that pulled me out of a dumpster years ago and kind of polished me up and kept me in the MSP space.
Do you know what? I don't think we've ever had Dan on this show in
Why
all
not?
that time. Yeah,
Why
and
not?
like I said, I caught up with him in Berlin. Yeah. So Dan,
Yeah,
if you're listening to this, give me a call. We're gonna have to get you on the show. Sorry,
should
Will.
absolutely do that. Um, so it's different. It's funny. I got asked not that long ago, actually, when I joined the CompTIA board, it was like you do this thing for the other board members to kind of introduce yourself. And one of the questions that they ask is, "Who's your mentor?"
Mm.
And I've always struggled with this one because I don't think there's any single individual that is kind of a mentor. I learn a lot from pretty much everybody that I meet, and positive and negative, right? So there are mentors in my life who I've learned how not to do things from. And
Yeah.
then there's others because I don't think there's the ideal person that is saying like, if I'm 100% like this person, I'll be ecstatic. I think there's, these kind of nuances that you take from every individual that you meet, and I think that kind of approach it from that situation. But if I can think about some highlights, obviously Dan is in there, and we've talked a lot about him. I've mentioned Austin McCord a couple of times. This is a fascinating thing for me, and for anybody that's kind of getting older, or as we get older in our space. Um, this is information, this is kind of knowledge that I pass down to the younger generation and my own team. I joined Datto and I'm probably at that time late 30s, early 40s. I've been in the IT industry for a while. They hired me because I was the only adult that was in the room. The entire executive team were all of his high school buddies. And very, very smart people, incredibly intelligent people, but very young, very little channel experience, and they bring me into the room and I was kind of hired as that person. So, I come in and they're like, okay, so go to market strategy. What do we do? And I start, kind of laying out the plan that we've all run a million times. It's the same freaking playbook we've all played, and it's been the beginning of time. It was handed down to me at Level. I handed it down, or at Compaq. I'm handing it down to the next generation. But then Austin started asking the simple question, why? And I'm like, dude, this is a pain in the ass. Why? Because that's just the way it's always been done. And he started challenging that. This is like the typical, this is when we were all complaining about millennials back in the day. He started challenging that and started pushing on that. Why? Why? And it became such a pain in the ass. But then I started realizing that if we don't evolve, or at least open-minded to evolving the way in which we think, you're going to become antiquated and you're going to get knocked out of this industry pretty fast. So what I learned from him was to constantly challenge even my own beliefs on how things should be done, because there's 1,000 ways to carve a turkey. It doesn't need to be the particular way that you saw this one person do it. Like, let's think about other ways. Maybe there's more efficient ways. And I think as working for a younger individual who's challenging the status quo and wanting to find better ways to route to business, it made me a better leader because I started questioning myself as to why. And I think that, was from mine, if you're going to continue to stay relevant in this business and in this industry forever, you need to evolve. We
Yeah.
can't be the old guys that are saying, well, that's just the way it's always been done, or, that's the way I know how to do it. We got to be a little more open-minded, a little more receptive to new ideas, especially as the newer generations are coming in, because at some point somebody's going to stop listening to us if we don't evolve.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love it. One of my pet peeves is in any aspect of life, not just technology. If you ask why something done, oh, because it's always been done that way.
Right.
Well, why? Yeah, I get it. And you just mentioned the doctor surgery, the blood pressure. I walk through airports or wherever I go, and you see things that are done a certain way because they've always been done that way. But
Hmm.
why? How can we do it differently? So I love that approach. And you give generously of your time and advice to others. That's clear to anybody listening to this show. But who does Rob Ray turn to for advice and guidance? You said you wouldn't point out a specific mentor, but when times get tough or you have a question that you can't answer, who does Rob Ray turn to?
That's a good question. I have a tendency to ask a lot of different people a lot of different questions. I've got individuals all over the world that I've had the opportunity to meet. I've got a lot of peers, that I'll talk to and bounce certain situations off of. I mean, we've talked about a couple of them during the course of this call. Those ones are easy. Um, it's a lot of I actually do I actually ask. I've got a younger team right now, and I'll ask even them questions, tell me if I'm crazy here when I'm thinking this, or thinking that, because they come at it even with a different and fresh perspective without the legacy of all that. But in essence, I go to my peer network. I think about Charlie Tomeo from Roost. I think about Paul Redding over at CyberQP. I think about Scott Barlow from Sophos. I mean, Scott and I are super close. Like, pretty much know everything about each other. Jason McGee, formerly ConnectWise. Like, these are all people that, if any one of us calls each other, we pick up the call immediately and we can have a great conversation, and I think that leveraging that and helping that. Nadia, I mentioned Nadia from Enable. I'll call her for advice. Christine Gassman over at she's over at Mail Protector. Like, these are all people that I've had the opportunity to work with and are going to give me the truth and going to give me honesty. Actually, it's funny. Christine is one of those people, she was my right hand over at Datto for pretty much my entire career there. And I I have this line with her when I call her up and I said, and forgive me here, Richard, but I say, my starting is, I need you to shit on something for me. And then if I know that if she can't, and she goes, you know what, this is a good idea, or yeah, you're on the right path, then I know it's good, because I literally challenge her with telling me why I suck at something. And she's pretty good at that. She's very good at that. But, there is the odd moment where she will back off and go, you know what, actually, I think you're onto something here. So,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that comes from.
I love it. And what some incredible names you've mentioned there that you've got on speed dial that you can pick up. Wow, that's incredible.
Mm.
You talked about some of the negative things that you've learned from, or sorry, lessons that you've learned how not to do things from certain people. We won't give them a name call, but I'm intrigued. What's the hardest lesson that you've learned along your journey in our space?
There's three things immediately come to mind,
Mm.
and it's all referencing managers that I've worked with in the past, not in this industry. Maybe a couple in this industry that are kind of doing it. Decision making. Like, I learned fairly early in my career that if you're ever going to be a leader, making no decision is worse than making a bad decision.
Right.
And there is nothing worse than working for somebody that just kind of procrastinates and delays and can't give you a straight answer on anything, wants to continue to think it, and then just hope that it goes away. And I find myself, I'm kind of guilty of that sometimes, but also I'm very quick on making decisions, and 9 times out of 10 I'm right. I do mess up, but again, I think it's no decision is worse than a bad decision. So I kind of push really hard on that, and that's one of the things I've learned. And I'm thinking about a specific leader from that perspective. Um, I think that uh, the image that you portray to your staff is also incredibly important. I want to be friendly and approachable and all those types of things, but it's incredible, and you don't think about it because in my head I'm just a goober. But meanwhile, the things that I say and the things that I do and how I react, it's incredible how intimidating that can be to some of the people that work for you, even though that's not your intention. I hear this all the time from my staff, where I'll start a text message with "Hey," and then I'll wait for them to respond, just because then I know they're online, and then I'll say, I don't know, like something stupid, like, "What are you up to this weekend?" Meanwhile, they see "Hey" from their boss, and they're like, "Oh no, something bad's happening. What did they got? They got something bad for me," like all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think also it's almost awareness of the impact that you have on people around you is super important, and that can be both positive as well as negative, right? So, those are things that, again, even myself, when last night my boss called me at like 10:30 at night. That is never a good thing when your boss calls you at 10:30. Turns out he just wanted to, like, wish me a happy Thanksgiving and tell me I was doing a great job. I'm like, shit, man. Like, why can't you put it all in one message? Why does it
Put that
like
in a text, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, just awareness of the impact that you have on people's lives. And by the way, by the way, I'm not suggesting that that was bad or anything like that, in case my boss is watching this. You can call me at 10:30 every night as long as it's good news. Things like that. I think, it's just little kind of stupid stuff like that, but it's the little things that are important, right? And you and I have had this conversation. I know it's just the little tiny things in life that, kind of differentiate it from being better versus worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rob, I'm very appreciative of your time today. As usual, as always, you've given generously of your time and experience, advice, insights. Absolutely love this conversation. I could talk to you all day, my friend, but
I know we
you've
could.
got another 15 podcasts to do after this,
I
haven't you?
did.
So having them in the Europe as well. So we can. So
One of the benefits of being in the United States is I do get to take advantage of their Thanksgiving. So my day is winding down. So we will
Oh, well,
see.
I appreciate it. Let's go over something we talked about earlier, PAX 8 Beyond. So PAX 8 Beyond is taking place in both Denver and Amsterdam next year. So remind us of the details. If anybody listening is getting a lot of FOMO, they're not going to get a little, they're going to get a lot of FOMO about those events. Where should they go to find out more?
Pax8beyond.com will give you all the access. So the Denver event, we're going to have 2,200 MSPs there, probably about 3,000 people total. That'll be hopefully the largest, if not one of the largest MSP events ever in our space.
Yeah.
So definitely would encourage people to do that. It's an international conference. We will have people from all over the world at that conference. And then October 13th is Beyond Amsterdam, which I think, again, if you go to pax8beyond.com, you'll find more details about the European conference as well. But
Yeah.
would love to have you join and participate. And I promise to keep that energy up and keep that, kind of information flowing and give lots of opportunity for all the good things that we talked about.
Absolutely. And we are not shilling here when we say it is one of, if not the best event we've ever
I
been
appreciate
to.
that.
And it's not just me that says that, the overwhelming feedback from attendees there. So, Rob, you have done an incredible job. You've done an incredible job throughout of your career. So we appreciate all that you've done
I
for our
appreciate
industry
that.
as a whole. Our industry is better for having you in it. For anybody who's perhaps listening to this, wants to continue the conversation with you, you're very accessible online. What's the best place for them to find you?
Uh, on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Facebook, I'm on them all. Other than that, my email address is rrae@pax8.com.
Fantastic. Well, I would encourage you reach out to Rob. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, Rob. I've enjoyed it a great deal, my friend. Appreciate you. Again, as always, you've just given freely of your time and experience to us, and
Always a
I know how
pleasure.
busy
Always
you
a
are. So
pleasure.
taking an hour or so, 90 minutes out of your day to speak to somebody from the Europe, I know is a
From the
big deal.
Europe.
So I appreciate it.
I have to see if we can make that stick.
Rob Ray, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you, Richard. Always appreciate you.
Cheers.
Bye.
And I should find out a way to actually stop the recording.